And you will remember how you did step by step,
Okay.
right?
Go.
So today we're comparing the minor pentatonic and some other notes we're going to add to it, to each chord in the blues, right? Traditionally, the blues will have 3 dominant chords. 1 dominant, root, flat 7, third. 4 dominant, which is root, major third, flat 7. Interesting to note that they flip. Root, major third, and 7. Root for a different chord. 7, major third. They kind of zigzag, like flip the switch there. 7, 3, 3, 7, or vice versa. Right? String wise, they kind of flip. It was here, now it's there. The 4 chord, and here's the 5 chord. Right? Similar to the 4 chord in its internal structure, its string correlation. And it's very important to remember the 12-bar blues in its most basic form, which is 4 bars of the 1 chord. And it's bad when you just play chords, but when you play leads on it, it's like I say, like telling a story. It's good, right? Quick change or quick switch. People go the 2nd bar and put the 4 chord, and then go back to the 1 on the 3rd bar. 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And that's the quick switch. That was perhaps the first change that happened to the traditional chord progression. Now we're going to compare the scale notes. Pentatonic scale. There was more than 2 octaves of the scale here. There's the root of the scale, the flat 3rd in the scale, the 4th of the scale, the 5th of the scale, and the flat 7th of the scale. Then it's octaves of everything. We did the 5 notes. The 1 chord. The root of the chord is the same root of the scale. B flat here in this case. The flat 3rd in the scale is why it sounds so... It's the sound of the blues. I'm playing a major chord with a flat 3rd added to it. So if we had 2 guitars to play it, you would hear this note and this note at the same time. Right? Now, is there a way to do that? I'm going to try. There be it. I don't recommend. Major 3rd, minor 3rd, that sounds better. That's that blues, jazzy, quirky sound of it. Doesn't comply with the ho-ho half realm of notes, which is known as the diatonic system. Right? That's all out of it. So it has stuff in common, but it doesn't belong in there entirely. So now the flat 3rd then is what gives that contrast that against the 1 chord sounds like the blues. The 4 in the scale doesn't sound any good here. It's like playing this and that at the same time. In other contexts, I don't disapprove. I don't disagree. I kind of like that sound. But in the blues, instead is good, but at the same time is not. If you're soloing with 2 guitars with looper pedal, you feel that this doesn't. You want to get away from it. You want to go either low or higher or lower than that. So the 4th in the scale didn't quite match the 1 chord well. As a permanent note in it. As a passing tone, it's okay. Anything's okay. Even the chromatic scale is okay. Or it can sound really good depending on what to do to it. The 5th in the scale, it's also a note in the chord if you want to play it in the chord. So that complies. The flat 7th in the scale is the flat 7th in the chord. So all these things that happen in the chord happen in the scale. Right? The almost all, because this one doesn't, right? So we can now make a melody that starts with the scale and ends on the minor 3rd in the scale, and that works with the chord. Da, 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 da. Or we can bend a note from the chord into this melody. The major 3rd, and you can end it there. It sounds pretty. that's the analysis of the scale versus the 1 chord. There's only one bad note out of 5. Now on the 4 chord, root of the chord happens to be the 4th in the scale. So that note that wasn't good before, now it is. It's the root of the chord. Root of the scale is the 5th of the chord. Right, so the root of the scale is good for the 4 chord. The flat 3rd in the scale, if you play it on this string, same note, you notice that this is the flat 7. Root octave here. There they are. Scale here. So that note's good. It's the flat 7. That flat 3rd that sounded jazzy and bluesy and contrasting now agrees with the chord you're playing. That's why if you played that phrase, it lands right on this chord. So that phrase sounds very resolving and very conformant with the law. So the root of the scale is the 5th of the 4 chord. The flat 3rd is the flat 7th of the 4 chord. Numbers, numbers, numbers. The flat 3rd in the scale happens to be the flat 7 in the 4 chord. The 4th in the scale is the root of the 4 chord. The 5th in the scale isn't a bad note. Matter of fact, if you octave it, I'm sorry, that's this one. So it's a good note. The 5th works. The flat 7 in the scale, that doesn't really work. So if you get, this note is an A flat. See, it doesn't. I'm just finding a string to play that exact note. This one that the chord isn't using. Now it's better. I went right, or, but this doesn't. Different context maybe. So the flat 7 on the scale was the single note in the scale that didn't quite agree with the 4 chord. It's a half step above a core chord tone, right? The major 3rd in the 4 chord doesn't like this along with it. That sounds weird. So 1 out of 5, not bad. The scale works great for those 2 chords, right? You feel it when it's not good and move away from it. And now here's the 5 chord. The root of the scale isn't great because it's that note that suspends the chord. It's by the same token of what we were talking about. The chord is here, that note would be right here. Right, so different context, classical music, Bach, okay. Here in the blues, it didn't quite work. It makes it into an advanced quarto harmony thing, not traditional blues. So that wasn't great. This sounds more like a spooky movie scene.
Kind of cool.
I like it, but it's not really the traditional blues, right? So that note doesn't match quite right. The 4th in the scale, that matches great because it's in the chord. It's the flat 7th of the chord. This 5th on the scale is actually the root of the chord. So these 2 are great, right? This doesn't work great. It's more advanced altered chord. It's not traditional blues, it's jazz, right? So for blues, nah. So just 2 notes were good, right? So the scale, passing notes, if you play the scale fast enough, everything goes, but you're not going to resolve your phrase in any of those other notes. So the scale's got limited usability. Yet people use just the scale to play through the whole thing all the time. They just limit to finish on those two notes. You're tired of listening to phrases like this on the 5 chord. Use the 5 chord. And then at that point, from the 1 chord in the second last bar, I'll play the whole last line. 5 chord, 4 chord, 1 chord. Right? Just went in there and played the 2 notes in the scale that fit the chord. Right? Everything else wouldn't resolve. No, that didn't work, right? Can you hear it? That was great. No, same phrase. No, that didn't work, right? So the only 2 notes in the scale that work to resolve in the chord is these 2, and they can be found here, here, here.
So that's the root and...
That's in the chord, that's the root and the flat 7.
Okay.
In the scale, that's the 4th.
Yep, and the 5th.
And which is here. And the 5th, yes. Any other note in the scale. Now at the end, so that's comparison scale versus the 3 chords. In the end, if we add 2 notes from the Dorian scale here, they're not pertaining to that pentatonic scale, but they'll sound good on all the chords, right? It's the 2nd of the scale. Jazzy. Jazzy too.
Even on the 5?
We'll get there. Here it comes. It's actually a note in the chord. It's the 5th of the chord. So it's even kind of boring. Great to phrase with instead of... The other note that sounds really good is this one. On the 1 chord, in the scale it would be a major 6. That's in the chord. It's the major 3rd in the 4 chord. The 5 chord, it's the 9th. With those 2 notes. So add those 2 notes to your scale. It's really easy. You can do this to the scale. There's the 2nd. There's the 6th. pentatonic. You have this too, right?